We are very privileged to have Bob Heil with us tonight, and I'd say most of us are very familiar with Bob and the headsets and microphones that his company has made over the years, and just say they've been a key part of my various VHF contest efforts over the years. Some of you may be familiar, some of you may not, with his great accomplishments in the area of music, audio, and broadcast audio. So and I think Bob's going to tell us quite a bit about those areas. So I won't go into great detail telling you things that we're about to hear, I believe. So we're extremely privileged to have Bob. And some of you may know, a lot of you probably don't, Bob was also a good friend of our longtime club president, Ted Goldthorpe, W4VHF. So another great reason to have Bob with us. So anyway, Bob, we're very pleased to have you join us tonight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, like when I hear the word Charlotte, I don't care what it is. I always think of he and I to say we're really good friends, because I was a monster VHF operator in the early days. And actually, even before he'd gotten involved. But I love you guys, and I thank you for invited me. What I'm going to do is, you can't really put a title of this thing. I call it optimizing signals, but I'm going to get into some of my history, and you'll soon learn why I can't lay a name on it. I started when I was 15 years old. One of my high school chums had bought a Harvey Wells and a SX99 from Walter Ash. And so I figured, why not? So I became an amateur, a technician. I was a technician for 17 years, because when I got into it in 1956, the bands were wide open. I'm talking about 6 meters. It was an amazing time. And I listened around one night. I'd only been on the air just a couple of weeks, and I heard the most ridiculous signal ever. I mean, what is wrong with this guy's audio? Next night, came back, same deal. It's like, what happened here? Well, I hit the button called BFO on my SX99, and there's a voice. I'm going, that's that single sideband stuff that I read about in QST. And it was K0DGE, and he was on single sideband in September of 1956. Nobody was on sideband in those days in 6 meters. And each night I would talk to him, and he was so thrilled because he was making adjustments on his transmitter, and I could give him details of good, bad, or indifferent. And he invited me to come see him one day. I was at that time playing the organ at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. I started that also when I was 15. And I rolled up in front of his address, and he was the chief engineer at KMOX Radio, CBS. And I said, Larry, would you build me one of those sideband transmitters? No, but I'm going to teach you how. And he did. Went back to Walter Ash, bought a Central Electronics 10B, had plug-in coils. That was a kit. I'd take it by a couple of different times and make sure I was doing it right, because I'd never put anything like that together. He also had me go buy a grid dip meter so we could wind some coils. Then I bought a chassis punch, some Greenleys, and I bought a chassis from Walter Ash, and we built a 36 megacycle oscillator. What do you get? 36 and 14. You're on 6 meter sideband. The station grew really quick. When the Dream receiver came out, the NC300, I had to have it. I also put together a Heathkit Seneca. I don't know why, but I did. And it was just so much fun. And I was making quite a bit of money playing the organ at the Fox Theater. So my loving parents, they were just incredible to me, because they didn't have to pay any money, but they were just thrilled that I could do things and have fun. And so the next thing I did, I wanted to put up a tower. A local Motorola dealer a few miles down the road, he K9 SGD and K9 EBA, he was a contractor. He had all kinds of cranes and things. They put up a 110-foot drone for me, and I'd only been on the air about a year. We put up a 36-foot long Telerex. Now notice that antenna. That antenna doesn't have elements that are either horizontal or vertical. That was an experimental antenna that Telerex had put together. And what they were doing is trying to reduce fading. QSB is not because somebody loses power. It's because of polarization. And a lot of guys didn't know this, and we soon learned. But even today, of course, there's signals when they leave your antenna, they don't stay that way. They might turn over from vertical or horizontal 2 or 3 times. And many times you'll lose 10 to 15 dB of signal because it's cross polarization. And that was such a learning curve. So then I put up another 50-foot tower, the Motorola dealer and my contractor friend. And it was kind of funny because I knew I could care less about anything under 50 megacycles. And they brought over a TA33 and said, "You're going to need this." I said, "No, I'm not." "Yeah, we're going to put it there." I never did use it because I was just fascinated with VHF. Because as I said, the band was open all the time. Well, I went to Walter Ash about a year later, and I bought a Johnson 6 and 2 Thunderbolt, and I put that together. And my wonderful friend K0DGE, the CBS engineer, he helped me. And of course, he was all the time, respect that high voltage, Heil. You're not dealing with 12 volts. You're dealing with 3,500. You can kill yourself. I learned to respect things. So I had quite a 6-meter and station at that time, 1.5 kilowatts on 6 and 2 meters on single sideband. There weren't very many of us on sideband, but we were very rare. But I really enjoyed 6 meters. I get a call one day from Bob Drake of the Drake Company, W8CYE. "Are you the guy that's got that kilowatt single sideband on 6 and 2 meters?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I would like to invite you to one of our club meetings. We do this annually." And he said, "We have all kinds of celebrities come in, and I know you'd want to meet them, but we'd like to hear how you did that. It's a technical meeting." And they have people like Wes Shum, who brought single sideband to ham radio. If you had a trivia contest, most people would say Art Collins. Art was 6 years late to the party. It was Wes Shum in 1948 with Central Electronics. Carl Mosley, Bill Halligan, the guys from Hammerland, the Telerex, and the J-Beam Company. Where was this? This was in Dayton, Ohio. It was at the Biltmore Hotel. That is where the first hamventions were held. They'd take all the furniture out of one of the floors, and then they had the Collins room, the Mosley room, Telerex, Central Electronics, all of these guys. I was just fascinated because as a young kid, they were like celebrities to me because I used to read about them in the magazines. In '64, the Dayton Hamvention moved out to Hera. Well, while I was there, the J-Beam Company came to me.
Bob?
Yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second? This is Wayne KU4V. Biltmore Hotel. I worked for NCR in the 1971-75 era. And when I would go to Dayton, Ohio for NCR training up at Sugar Camp, they called it, I stayed at the Biltmore Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Many times. And I recall something about radios and things of that nature. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. That's a nice picture.
Yeah, that's great.
Bring back a lot of memories.
Oh, for me too. That's the real hamvention. But Telerex, the J-Beam Company came to me and said, "We are looking for somebody that had some high power on 2 meters. Would you like to do this experiment?" Why not? No, wasn't in my vocabulary. So they sent up a 128 element 2 meter array. It was 8 stacked J beams. Well, my Motorola dealer, he knew a lot about phasing harnesses and stuff like that. So we put up another 40-foot tower on a lot beside us. It was an empty lot, and the boom was a 40-foot roam. Well, this thing was an amazing array. I was doing moon bounce and all that. We had a pair of prop pitch motors for rotators, and I was again mesmerized by all this stuff because it was a big learning curve, but it was fun. And this buying equipment, you can see in that center picture, building things. I love to build. And that was a 6146 on 6 meters, an AM rig. Well, at that same time in 1959, I got a job at the Holiday Inn in St. Louis. I was 50 miles away. That was the largest Holiday Inn in the chain. And the deal there was it was all on one floor. Think about that, 600 rooms. And the restaurant was a 4-star German restaurant. And I built a pipe organ there. I played for a year or so with just my B3 Hammond, but then I convinced them to let me do this. And oh man, everything started happening. Busloads of people from East Coast, West Coast to come and see this kid playing this pipe organ. I had the pipes all behind glass. All of the instruments on the piano all worked from the keyboard of the Wurlitzer console, just as they do in the real air-driven theater organs. That was driven by pinball machines. I went to the pinball company in St. Louis and bought a whole bunch of 24-volt pinball actuators. But it was just a wonderful time. I learned a lot, and I had been playing for 12 years, 6 nights a week. That's why I loved 6 meters so much. I could come home at midnight, and man, the bands were still open. Yay, baby. But it kept growing. In 1962, actually, I did this in 61. I built the first transverter, band switching transverter. You see it in the lower corner, SB62. So I had a real powerhouse on 6 and 2 meters with my new transverter. But I got a job at CQ Magazine writing a column called VHF single sideband. That is how rare it was. We had our own column, and it was really fun, guys and gals. I got to tell you, because this is where the serious people hung out. I mean, anybody that was into VHF, this was it, because we could exchange ideas. We were learning from each other. How did you get there? How did you do that? It was a place to experiment. But of course, today, 6 meters is a wasteland, and it's really sad. I took all my 6 meter stuff down a couple of years ago because you can't have a conversation. You just can't, because all they want is your good square, and they're gone. Wait a minute, come back here. Where are you? Where are you living? What kind of transmitter you got? They don't want to talk to you because they're afraid there's a grid square and they will miss it. Calm down. Nope. And so I said, this is not for me. And so I said, see you later for 6 meters. Well, I had been playing those 12 years, and I thought it might be time to change directions. And I did. My hometown of Marissa, Illinois, my mother and father, they had a clothing store there, but I started a little music shop. I ended up with a Hammond organ franchise, but I didn't know what was about to come. You see my dad down there in the white shirt hanging out of his clothing shop. He and mom ran. Well, the situation was that I was selling a lot of Hammond organs. I did not know. I'm really serious about this, and a lot of guys think I make this up. I didn't hardly know who the Beatles were because I was listening to George Wright, Jesse Crawford, Lynn Larson, all of these great theater organists. My mentor and teacher, Stan Can, had hired me to play at the Fox Theater with him. And that's all I knew. But the deal was that the band started finding out, wait a minute, there's this guy with a soldering iron. And so they would come to me. One of the first kids came to me, had an amplifier. I had never seen a guitar amp. He turned it upside down, And he said, it's broke. It's broken. What'd you do to it? Probably made it try to go to 12 and it only went to 10. I know what you did. Well, I looked inside. What was it? It was a pair of 6V6s and a 5U4. Hey, that's the modulator in my Harvey Wells that I have had since 1956. Still on the air. I was on this morning with it. I'm on 3885 every morning. Still running. Still has original tubes, by the way. But anyway, these guys were all crazy about the fact that I could fix things. We're talking Michael McDonald. We're talking REO Speedwagon, Danny Fogelberg. These are all in high school. REO wasn't happening yet. They were just kids in a little garage band. But they would come to Marissa because I could fix things. Well, I soon learned you better start selling guitars and amplifiers. I became the largest Sun amplifier dealer in the country with just a year or so. And I was a huge Fender dealer and all the other stuff. Gibson guitars, do a lot of Les Pauls and Fender Stratocasters and so on. And I really got involved in it. But I was renting Hammond organs to the arenas, like the hockey arena in St. Louis, the basketball arena. And the PAs there were terrible. They were things built in the 1930s when the building was built. Oh, it was terrible sound. Little bitty columns about 3 foot high. And I'm going, no, this isn't going to fill 10,000 seats. So I started building things. The Fox Theater called me one day and said, hey, you need to come by here because we're throwing out a bunch of speakers. Really? Okay. What are you doing? Well, we're putting in a new sound system. And you really need to take a look at some of this because it's out in the alley. Really? Well, hams don't throw anything away, do we? And so I got a bunch of speakers, put together a really nice big sound system, and I started renting it to the arenas and stuff. And this is a small one. I need to put another picture in here because this was just one of the things for this. This was at the Fox Theater, actually. And it was a Ye Old Music Shop was my store name. So it was plastered all over everything. And it really gained a lot of recognition because some of the acts that we would do, Dolly Parton, she was only 22. Joe Walsh and the James Gang, Buck Owens, Porter Wagner, and of course, Joe and I became really good friends because we did one of his first tours. Well, it all came to a screeching halt one day when the Fox Theater called me and said, hey, Heil, you still have those big speakers and you got something working? I said, I do. He said, talk to this guy. I said, what's the problem? He said, we have a disaster here. You have a disaster? What are you talking about? Well, this band came in here tonight and they didn't have any PA. It was confiscated by the FBI and the DEA last night. What's going on? Well, here's the story. The band was on probation out of the state of California. Their sound man owned the sound equipment, and he was one of the inventors of LSD. He was on probation, wasn't supposed to be out of the state of California, but they were going to sneak in this little tour. It was going to go from New Orleans, St. Louis, out to Ohio and the East Coast. Okay. Well, the DEA, they visited that first show in New Orleans. After it was over, they handcuffed the sound guy and all of his gear, and they were back to California. There were no cell phones. The band came on to St. Louis. See you at 3 o'clock on the stage, Owsley. Okay. Who was this band? It was the Grateful Dead. The stagehand, he handed the phone to Jerry, and I started telling Jerry about what I had. Had all these JBL speakers and radial horns and Macintosh amps. And I never forget, you have Macintosh amps? Nobody had Macintosh amps in that business in those days. I didn't know that. But I soon found out what was going on. That night was something very special. We got up there and took some of the sound equipment and had an incredible show. They were thrilled to death. We went on to the rest of the tour. I had to stay back because I had a store to run and I had people working for me. But I had some really good engineers on the road, and they took them on to Jersey. You can go into Google and you put the night rock and roll sound was born. And the reason for that is there was a journalist. I never met him, but I knew he was there. He published that in Billboard magazine about this little music shop in Marissa getting the Grateful Dead contract. And from there, it went super crazy. They were the next town in Ohio. Jerry called me and he said, "Hey, Heil, what is this ye old music shop you have all over the cabinets?" And I said, "Well, that's the name of my store." He said, "We have trouble pronouncing all those words. We're just going to call you Heil Sound when I write this check out to your guys. Is that okay?" And so it was. I'm not making this up. Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead named Heil Sound. It's a true story. We were friends for all the rest of his life. I miss him dearly. He would make many trips to Marissa because we'd sit down and talk about things. They had ideas, but nobody wanted to talk to him. They were a bunch of long hairs. They don't know it. These guys were brilliant. And one thing about them, when they came around me, they didn't do any of their nonsense, because you're looking at a guy that's still this day at 80 years old. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never tasted beer. I've never done drugs, of course. But they knew that right off. And they really respected that to me. Well, I respected that to them. So when they would come to my place, they came to learn something or get something, get my knowledge. No screwing around. And so we were very fortunate that I had all of that going with all the groups. We were building just tons of systems, big stuff, little stuff. That's Jeff Beck's system on the left. That was a very portable system that would fill a 2,500 seat hall. He liked to do smaller halls, but some of the bigger things. And that's that speaker. That speaker was very prominent for us. That was a 30-inch woofer from a Patrician, an Electro Voice hi-fi cabinet that Lou Burrows and Al Kahn built. I bought the speaker and built a bass amplifier, and it was all over the world, really, because the bass players would rent it from me. And of course, ye old music got a lot of popularity from it. But because of all this, things really started to pop. Many groups. This is just a few of them. Jeff Beck and Jethro Tull, Joan Baez, the Beach Boys, and Humble Pie. Humble Pie is going to come back in a minute. One of the things I hated were all of these groups were just, they'd come to the shows in Volkswagen vans and wanted to have that, wanted to have a pickup truck, the gear sometimes was busted and broken. They didn't have any kind of consolidation. I said, that's enough. And so I leased a 40-foot semi, and I bought a Greyhound bus that we restored the engines and stuff and put 11 beds in it so we could sleep the road crew. We were the first sound company to do an actual tour. And that was really great because we'd get there on time and they were much rested. Nobody had to worry about anything like they did before. This is one of the groups we did. This wasn't the first tour we did with that, but it's one of them. Their manager called me one day and said, "Hey, you guys got that big PA?" I said, I am. "What do you need, sir?" "Well, I got this new group I'm managing. They're really loud and they're going to be big stars. So if you could start out on this tour, I'd appreciate it." "Who is that group?" No one ever guesses. That happens to be ZZ Top without beards. Yes, we're still working with them, only I do their microphones today. So a lot of fun. And there's so many more stories. I lived with the Who for about 6 years and on and off. And we just would do things that none of the other sound companies could do because they didn't have the ham radio background behind them. It's really, really true. I could do things and I wasn't afraid. You know how we are. We grab a soldering iron. Maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. But I was very lucky about that. After 2 years on the road, Pete Townsend called me and he said, "Hey, we're going to take a year off. Come here. I need you." So I flew back over to London I went to his home. And he had a studio up above his home in the Thames River. Incredible stuff. Now I get this. This is 1973. He was way ahead of the curve when it came to synthesizers and all of that. One of the things about this that really blew me away, he had all kinds of other things, but you see that red chair sitting in front of a little $900 Lowry home organ, which I was selling in my store. So I knew what it was. What he did with it, you'll see in the next picture on the right, he tied it up to his synthesizer. And why did he do that? Well, he did it because he was doing a lot of his music on that. And I'm going, whoa. And I was so thrilled that I could help him. It was really a big part of a lot of the things we did. But he had an idea. He said in 1973, things are really big right now with quad sound. Do you think that you could build a PA that we can move Roger's voice around the hall? And yeah, we can do that. Why not? And so we started in, and it just so happened that I was working with a sister company in London, and we were building the very first console for any kind of touring and rock bands. Up until then, we were using broadcast mixers and just kind of putting together whatever kind of crazies we could. And so we finished it, and it became the first quadrophenia mixer, quadraphonic mixer for quadrophenia. So those were things that guided me through all this. I was so thrilled with what went on in those days. We were looking at the business very differently than most. And one of the things they needed were monitors. You see, when you have a big PA, everything that goes out front, you can't hear that on stage. The bigger the hall, the bigger the PA, the worse you hear it. You don't hear anything. You just hear a bunch of rumble. So you can't hear your partner over here singing with you to get the harmonics, or can't hear his guitar sometimes. And so they needed monitors. But the problem with that is if you put a speaker right near you and you put a microphone in there, what happens? It feeds back. Well, how do you get rid of that feedback? I was the first guy to figure it out. And if you go see early pictures of the Grateful Dead, you'll see where we had two microphones mounted. One fed the front system, the other one fed the monitors under their feet. But that didn't cut down. In fact, it made it worse. How did I make it work? Well, that was simple. I learned it from antennas. You remember the years we spent phasing things? I ran those speakers out of phase from the other microphone, and it didn't hear it. It was a real revolution in rock and roll music. And we did monitors for all kinds of people, from the Grateful Dead out. Even Billy Graham, I traveled with him for 2 years, and I really enjoyed those years with Billy. But we opened a plant in Marissa, 7,000 square foot building all kinds of things. And again, it's all because of my ham radio. I barely made it out of high school. Terrible grades. I didn't care. I was making more money than my teachers. I didn't need all this stuff. And that and ham radio, that was my life. But I was building power amplifiers, 500 watt power amps with modular power. So if something went wrong with the amplifiers or the mixers, they were all modular. And when we sold you that, you got a kit. It was an anvil carrying case, and it had modules in it, plus the screwdriver, and plus a quarter. Why would I put a quarter in there? So that when they put the defective one in there, they threw it on a Greyhound bus, called me on the phone, and a lot of them didn't have a quarter. Really, I'm serious. But that was a cool deal that put Heil Sound on the map, I'll tell you. My brother-in-law ran the wood shop, And we had our own fiberglass shop to build the radio horns, and a lot of different people doing different things. We had 35 people working on our production lines, and we were continuing to build big sound systems. I was also at that time was called on to do a lot of festivals. They weren't the funnest things I ever did, but we were the only company that could do it. You'll see there's 3 sound systems, left, center, right. Well, those were our complete sound systems for the road. The one on the left was what we would do Jeff Beck with. The one in the center was the Who's Next tours, and the one on the right was Humble Pie. And we'd put them together so we could have 2 stages. One would be playing while the other one would be setting up. It kind of kept everybody a little quiet, if you know what I mean. They weren't getting in any trouble. But I saw a few years of this, and this really kind of turned me to the other side. I say, good grief. So I wrote the book. Nobody at that time had any kind of knowledge of what was going on. And they would all come to me asking questions. How do you do that? How do you do that? And I wrote this book about how to do concert sound, how to stack your cabinets, how do you adjust equalization, how do you do power amplifiers and do them series, parallel, whatever. And it was really, really quite fun for me to kind of teach everybody. And one of the things that we got into before I got out of that business was with Joe Walsh. We became really good friends after the James Gang early on. He did an album. It was called Rocky. I'm all right. He did the song Rocky Mountain. The album was called. Guess this. This is. I'm not kidding you. It was The Smoker You Get. That's right. The Player You Get. I thought, what? Anyway. He was kind of crazy in those days. Not around me, though. Well, we put that band together for Barnstorm, his new band that was going to go on tour. And he had played with a little box in the recording studio. Bill and Dottie West in Nashville were good friends with him. And Pete Drake was a steel guitar player. He was the guy in that day for steel players. Yeah, he had a gadgeteer guy too. He had to build a little box with a little 3-inch speaker and a funnel, had a little hose on it, put it in his mouth, plugged his guitar amplifier into that little speaker. Wasn't very loud, but for recording purposes, it was okay. That is exactly what Joe used to record Rocky Mountain Way. And it was just incredible stuff that happened in those days. And again, all because of ham radio. Because he said, now what are we going to do live? We have to do this live. So Joe and I go out to my plant. We were putting his rig together for this tour. And we did the first high-powered talk box that I had designed. And it really was something very special. And I did one for Peter Frampton. We'd pulled Peter out of Humble Pie, and he did a solo act. And of course, he was one of the only guys that could really make it talk, and he made a huge career out of the Heil Talkbacks. We're very good friends even to this day, and I love him a lot. But at the same time, I was getting out of all that stuff. I got into broadcasting. I was 25 years covering 44 states on KMOX. That was a 50,000 watt clear channel. We covered all the states except the West Coast. We couldn't make it over the mountains. But I would go to these shows. CBS would send me to these shows because I was also in the home theater business. I mean, big time home theater. We're talking rooms that were $300,000 and had Macintosh amps and high def projectors that were $20,000 a piece. The only thing we could play on them were high def disc. But I was really into it because I could do sound for these home theaters. It was great. And while I was there, I was doing things with Ray Doby. Ray had brought me one of his prototypes of his Pro Logic. So now we could have surround sound in our studios. and in our displays at the CES shows. And Ray was a brilliant guy. I was so blessed to be able to work with him. And our theaters made quite an impact across the country. NBC had me bring it up to the Today Show in 1995. It was their Christmas pick. They did that every year. I don't think they do that anymore, but there I was with Al, a much thinner Al, I might say. But we were doing a lot of homes. You see on the left, I designed that in a guy's basement. And I had a gal come to me one time and she had a picture. She said, "Hey, can you do anything with this basement in my old house?" I said, "Well, absolutely." That's what we did to it. That curtain pulled back there was that off a room you just saw. Had the projector. I built it in a coffee table and things like that. Had another guy come and say, "What do you do with this?" "Well, you do that with it. Why not?" Well, then it all come to a halt once again. I got a phone call from Paul Klipsch. He was the father of hi-fi back in 48, 49. He was the father of the folded horn. This guy was a genius at audio. He called me and he said, "Are you the guy that's got that 10,000 watt PA?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I want to come and see that." So he flew his Bonanza up to Marissa from Hope, Arkansas. And I figured, oh, this is going to be terrible. Quite the contrary. All day long. He was much taller than I was. All day long. "Well, why did you do that?" "Well, how come you did that?" "Where'd you learn to do that? What college did you go?" "Ham radio." "No, what college did you go to?" Of course, that was the question I had a lot during my days on the road. "What college?" "None. Ham radio." Nobody believed me. Well, we became really good friends even that day. It started a wonderful relationship because he figured out where I was coming from and I knew where he was coming from. So he flew me back in his plane to Hope, Arkansas. In the next couple of days I'm telling you, it was like a drunk meeting Jesus. It was unbelievable what he did for Bob Heil. Here he's showing with it was a plexiglass model in his lab of his folded horn that he would put in the corner of a house. He was a wonderful guy. But he started guiding me to things of the Bell Labs. He said, "I think you need to learn this because if you're going to get into the sound business, this is what you need to learn." Although I'd been in it a long time. And he didn't teach me all of these things that day, but I am writing things down like a crazy man, as I hope you are tonight. What he started me with, I had a tough time. I had to go to the library. You can look it up on Google. He guided me to the studies of the Bell Labs. That was referred to as the idea factory of the 1920s. Bell Labs was the consolidation of AT&T and Western Electric, which was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. They put 4,000 scientists. You didn't hear it wrong. You didn't read it wrong. That's 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to this newly created Bell Telephone Labs. They were fully dedicated, catch this, to researching how the human ear worked and what frequencies were most important to understand the spoken word. What was going on with all this stuff? Well, I have a wonderful demonstration that you will never forget, and I hope will help you in all that you do from here out with any kind of audio. You will notice that my audio is not as pristine, you would probably call it. The word is articulate. What they discovered was truly amazing. And who it was really was
Bob, your voice is soft.
the lead scientist. Let me get a little articulation so you can really understand this. The lead scientist in it happened to be Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson. And they discovered something really, really.
Bob, your audio is way down, Bob.
Way down. What's going on here? Well, let me find out. I don't want to get it to feedback. That's probably better. That better for you?
Yes, much.
Okay, there you go. See, I had to equalize it because I had it flat. We're going to hear that in a minute. Those 4,000 scientists had a job to do, and the leading guys were Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson. They had to determine why the telephone system didn't work. What are you talking about? The telephone system didn't work. Well, this is exactly what happened. They put the telephone system together, took them years, this great invention, and they started running 2 wires in New Jersey and across America. Every 50 miles was a relay station to keep the voltage up, to keep the current up, and to keep the audio response up. But when they got to the other end and they picked up the telephone for the very first time, this is what they heard. What happened? What happened to our articulate audio? What happened? They couldn't figure it out because everything was exactly how it was going in. It was all equal throughout the entire United States. But when they picked up the phone on each end, this is what they heard. And so it was. Dr. Fletcher and Munson, they had to figure it out. Let me bring this back to reality. And when they found out, it was like, oh my goodness, listen, we think we know. Check out that graph. It is nowhere flat. The human ear does not hear flat. Look at the big holes in it. Down where you're listening right now, it may be 20 dB. But here's the interesting thing. Up at the top, at 100 dB or more, that's why kids like to listen to music loud. It's almost flat up there. But the one thing they did is they discovered what happened in the frequencies of voice communications. Actually, it was 300 to 3,000 they were interested in, which is what the telephone system ended up being. But you think that's flat? No way. They discovered, 4,000 scientists now, they discovered we needed 2.5K, really elevated, and elevated a lot. I have a parametric equalizer in my mixer. I'm going to turn off. Only one thing. I'm not turning down, up, or nothing in bass. I'm only touching the mid-range, which will bring us 2.5K. Just what the scientists told us we had to have for proper voice communications. I'm only taking away 2.5K. What happened? I did not touch the low end. I just took away what your ear is screaming to hear. I'll put it back in there. Here comes that 2.5K. Just one knob I'm turning. And the minute I hit 2.5K, immediately your brain says, wow, now the F and the S, the essence of the sound is very predominant. If we don't have 2.5K, the S and the S, the essence sound is gone. So we need to keep that 2.5 very rich. Now you can balance the lows to it, but we have to learn that there's some incredible things happening with voice communications. And in amateur radio, it's all about voice other than code or other things that we're doing. But for voice communications, this is what we have to do. Roll off everything under 100 hertz. That only muddies things up and wastes RF energy. So we want to get rid of those things that are doing us no good. And the maximum speech, we know that. is at 2.5. That's where I want my RF. You want to argue with 4,000 scientists? Because every once in a while, I'll get somebody try to argue. Well, there is no argument. Here's a great demonstration. You won't forget this one either. If the air in here was your RF, let's set the bandwidth at 300 to 3,000 cycles. And it's kind of flat. That's okay. But now watch what happens. If you have an equalizer and you open up the gate, so to speak, of 2.5K, you got that 2.5 rich and bold and open. And you're going to start narrowing it up. When you do, what happens to your RF? It's going to end up at 2.5K. And if you're doing contest work, that's where I want my RF. I don't want it out here. I want it there. You want to argue with 4,000 scientists? I know you're going to get guys scream at you, oh, turn that stupid thing. No, it is not stupid. It's science of audio. And we're just following that. And my whole life got changed once I got with Paul and started learning all of these wonderful things. And it's all proof from the Fletcher Munson and Bell Lab studies. And so we have to think about, what are we going to do from here? Well, I had been off the air for about 12 years while I was on the road. And I came back to ham radio and I'm going, what in the world happened to my Art Collins audio? I couldn't figure it out. Because when I left, my KWM2 and all the other things I had were very, very articulate, because they were only 2.1 wide. That was number one. But we were using ceramic or crystal microphones that had nothing but mid-range in them, and it was great. We didn't think about equalization. That was a non-issue. Well, I came into this thing, and some of the first things I heard were just awful. Big, bassy, boomy things. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. So I thought, what's the deal here? What is the deal? Well, the deal was nobody had ever talked about any other thing. Well, I got my matching microphone, Heil. Yeah, I know. It's painted the same color. It's the only darn thing matching. I found that out later when I started working for ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu. They don't build their microphones. I was dumbfounded when I found this out. Well, I said, I have to do something. I got to do something about this, because I started using some of the import rigs and they were terrible. All they had was mic gain. That was it. Well, what are we going to do? Well, I did it. I built an equalizer. I took a 2-band filter out of one of those consoles, the thousands we had built. And I thought this would be great for ham radio. The 2 filters were centered at 160 hertz and 2.5K. Where'd I learn that from? I couldn't change those filters, but I certainly could roll off some bass and punch the heck out of treble. So no problem. It worked great. I wrote an article. I wrote it for a QST, and I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, because all kinds of things in their magazines. But I wrote an article, and it was a DIY, how to build an EQ200. They accepted it. They called me back and said, not only are we accepting it, but we wanted you to know that this is a revelation. Equalization has never hit ham radio. We will make this our lead article, and it will get the cover award. It's very important. And so, of course, I was incredibly honored and humbled by this. but it kind of backfired. I put my phone number in the bottom, and I guess it was a build it yourself. I was a builder, man. This would be fun because it wasn't really difficult. But I put a kit of parts together. I went to Tentec. Tentec, a lot of people might not know this. The best thing about Tentec was their plant across the street. They built chassis and boxes, thousands of them for all kinds of people, me being one of them. And so we started assembling this kit. A lot more people were calling me saying, no, you build it. So I put the plant back together, hired two of my best solder gals, opened up just a 1,000 foot or so of the 7,000 square that had been closed for 2 years. And we started building equalizers. Well, in 1999, I received a letter from Dr. Inouye Communications, ICOM. A picture of his station was one of the, remember the great contest radio, the IC 781? First one that had a screen in it. That was a CRT even. But he had a picture of my equalizer. And what was even crazier, my gold line. This is the founder of ICOM. Thinking of new radio line, and I think we should have EQ 200. And so that started another incredible move of audio and ham radio. His new line was the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through, yes, the great 7851, the 7610, and of course, the wonderful, unbelievable 7300. But they just sent this to me a couple months ago. If you don't have one of these, you need to buy it. It's the neatest toy in the world. The 705. It is a 7300 on steroids. It's got D-Star, 2 meters, all kinds of other things running on a battery. It has my equalizer in it. This is an amazing, amazing thing. Of course, I usually couple it up to one of my amplifiers. I have a Central Electronic 600L. It's a class AB1, and 5 watts into there, get me a couple hundred watts out. So anyway, that started a big run. And I was really, I have to tell you, I was very, very blessed and honored because it's something that a little kid from Marissa, Illinois, that barely went to high school, opened up quite a door. He also had me build his microphone. I want a microphone for us. That's when I learned that these guys were just buying OEM stuff. But oh my God, it's painted the same color. What are you talking about, Heil? Matching. All right, sure. This is the only matching for ICOM there is. It's our ICM. Almost spells ICOM, won't work on Kenwood, won't work on a Yaesu, works on ICOM, but oh my gosh, does it for $100? You got to be kidding. And so this started a whole new deal for me to start looking into this stuff. Because as I got back on the air, a lot of these guys, they weren't using their equalizers. Why not? Well, I don't know. It's just a bunch of knobs and I don't understand it. And so I started really helping a lot of people, doing all kinds of these workshops and stuff with, of course, the equalizers. You look at the 7300, and all of them, they're the same now, but we're going to do this for Ragchew. Whenever you sit down to a radio, the first thing you do after you turn it on, the very first thing, no, don't go to the receiver and listen who's there. You dial up the transmit bandwidth. Are we going to be ragchewing today? Okay, we're going to do 100 on the low end, 2900 on the top end. Then we're going to go to the equalizer. We're going to roll off just a little bit of the bass. I don't want to take it to nothing. I want some low end. And we're going to plus that treble because that's a 2.5K. Remember, I mean, you definitely do not want to sound like this. No way do you want to be like this. You want some mid-range. So you just have to dial it back up. It's very simple. And so now you have some articulate audio. So simple. Okay, the contest groups. What do you do for the contesters? Well, this is what we did. I mean, it's the adjustment. First of all, what did I tell you? You're going to go down here and adjust 500 to 2,500. I don't care about anything under 500 because it means nothing. There is no information under 500 cycles that means a darn thing. So get rid of it. See, the contesters already knew this and set the top at 25. So then you go up here and you just max everything out on bass, -5 and +5 on the treble. And that really works well. And one of the things that I learned in 1985, I got a call from the Southern California DX Club. They wanted me to build them a headset. We hadn't really built a headset. What was I building? The great tool of all contesters. And they will each one tell you this because each one of them have one of these. Bet you money. This element is the worst sounding element in the world. It's terrible. Well, why would you do that, Heil? You're a fool. The headset I built was the BM10. Remember that? It's still in our line. I love it. It's a lightweight headset, and it's got our elements in it. Well, they took off, and they were going to Clipperton. And I was really honored. They had me come out, and I watched them put all of the trunks on the ship and take off. And in one of those trunks were a whole bunch of my microphones for the first time. Why would you want to do that, Heil? Well, here's why. Got a little demonstration again. I love demos. You can say anything but prove it. Okay. Here comes the worst sounding microphone God could ever create. But look at it. Listen to what you're hearing. You're hearing nothing under 600 hertz. And this huge 10 dB spike at where? 2.5K. Where did I learn to do that? Paul Klipsch and the Bell Lab studies. Now, you go on a pile up. Guess who's going to be on top? This guy. Because the bass guys, they're going to be way down at the bottom. They really are. Because they're going to be talking like this. And you're going to go, oh, just get out of my way. You can talk all you want, but I'm going to be much louder. It's a very simple thing. And so we have all these years created microphones for different purposes. Let me get this back. Got into building broadcast microphones, all kinds of other things. And I'm very proud that it was Paul Klipsch and the guys that taught me from Bell Labs. But once you get your transmitter adjusted, there's no problem. They all have different ways of doing it. The 7610 doesn't look a whole lot different, but it's all there. The very early ones, come on here. The very early ones had the Pro 1, Pro 2. They had things that looked like the 7800, which was like this, but it was all there. You just had to adjust it all. But at one of the Daytons, 2 years after we had started working with ICOM, Dr. Hasegawa comes to me at my booth, much taller than I. I want to talk to you. What do you got, sir? I want to do it better. I said, well, we could do a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. Not so fast. What'd be the problem? Education. You see, with a shelving like this guy, you didn't have to figure out the frequencies of the filters. I did that for you. ICOM copied that. That's what they are. All you had to do was plus or minus. Easy stuff. Well, with a parametric, you don't have two controls. Watch the screen. Listen, this is very true. There are 9 buttons. You have to adjust 9, and each one of them interferes with the other. So for that reason, when I listen on the air today and talk to guys with Jesus, they're still in the default mode. How sad. I did what I thought was the most amazing thing in ham radio for equalization, and I don't use it. It's very simple. And if you have never learned how to do a parametric, I'm going to teach you in the next about 90 seconds. If I had a 10-year-old child and brought him into here, knew nothing about radio, they will learn how to do this. It's no big deal. There are 3 different filters. 3. Don't need any more. What they do, each one of them has 3 functions. You have to adjust the frequency, you have to adjust the level, plus or minus, and you have to adjust the bandwidth, audio bandwidth. We're going to set all of them at 2 octaves. You really don't need to go beyond that or worry about it. Just set it at 2 octaves. So here you go. You're going to set the first filter at 200. You could set it at 1. I like to set it at 2. I don't like any big boomy. But that's still very, very, very healthy. So we have 200. We're going to do minus 3 or 4 dB, 2 in the bandwidth. We've already got one of them finished. We're going to do this before 90 seconds. The next frequency, it is always in my entire audio world, thousands of shows. There's something about 4 to 800, 900. It's a boxy sound. Take your hands and put them up on your ears like this. You'll hear that. It's a boxy sound. You have to get rid of that. And so we're going to set 900 minus 3 or 4 dB, 2 octaves. The last filter, of course it's going to 2.5K plus 8. I want it in your face. You've heard several demos of why you want to do that. Now, you can feather these out. Maybe you only wanted it plus 6. You got to listen to yourself. I always do it in another receiver, and it works great. And that's it. We did this in about a minute. Frequency, level, width. Frequency, level, width. Frequency, level, width. Now you have to, very first, adjust the bandwidth, 100 to 2900, or wherever you're going to go. And there's one other thing. This is very important. Got to pay attention here. Yaesu is the only radio that has a button called save. And after you do all of this, if you don't engage the save button, none of this stuff is working. And you're going to set your bandwidth. But that's how simple it is. And we have all of that stuff on our website. If you have never been to my website lately, you want to do that. A couple of reasons. Under support, there's 50, 60 pages of all things ICOM, all things Yaesu, all things Kenwood, all things Elecraft, telling you a lot of things about your radio that I'm sure will help you. Also, while you're there for the next week, you need to do this. We're giving away a PR37. This is a marvelous microphone that we make for all kinds of vocalists. Listen to Carrie Underwood and Keith Urban and all those guys. This is our best effort. It's got a ton of low end by itself, which means we don't have to EQ it much. And it's got wonderful treble. I really like this microphone. And it's starting to make its comeback, stop by into ham radio. So we're thrilled about that. And I hope that you enter the contest and win it. I think it comes off, when is it? May the 19th is we're going to announce it. So just have a few days, but go up there and enter that contest. You're going to love it, especially if you win this microphone. It's really great. Well, the other thing as we get along here, Joe Walsh and I, as I told you, we're very, very good friends even to this day. He told me, he said, Heil, we need to build a better microphone. I said, why? He said, well, because all these ball mics that you see all of them using, they're 65 years ago they were developed. Now they're just made in Mexico and China. Honest to God. It just frosted me when I discovered that a couple of years ago, that they moved the plant over there. Because what happens is you guys stay right here. You know, you've seen them. They don't get away from here. No, I wanted a microphone to answer Joe. It's fully Omni on the front and you don't lose 1 decibel. It's really good. And then he wanted one that had really great rear rejection. 40 dB of rear. No other microphone has this. And that all come about because I was trying to help him and answer it. But now, oh my goodness, so many of our microphones are like that. And the ham radio microphones have really surged forward. PR781 Flex Radio sells it. A lot of the amplifier, the ham radio dealers sell all these. And I got to show you one that's really fun. That gold microphone, pay close attention to it. You'll notice right above the little window that tells us what frequency the transmitter's on, you'll notice it's got a bunch of dents in it. Gold is quite soft, right? That's Carrie Underwood's microphone. She's a tapper. And of course, we have to make microphones. They don't pick that up. You try that with your Shure. You try that with any other microphone, and you're going to hear this. No, not with ours. She wears big rings. And when she taps that gold microphone, she puts all those dents in there. This is a true story. Oh, crazy. We have a custom shop. The guys can do anything for you. Just wonderful stuff. But we're so blessed to do microphones for that industry. We did all the microphones for Last Man Standing. And Ray Novak from ICOM and we got together with John Amadeo, who is the producer of the show. And he said, you know, if we had some ham gear in here, well, we put it together for him. And it was featured in several of the shows. And I think there were 13 or 14 of the crew became hams. And after the show on Tuesdays when they taped, they'd get on the air and you could talk to them. But one of the other things that really happened was Joe said, I need you to build me a microphone that I can't hear my guys behind me. I put mics by his guitar amp and all you hear is everybody else. And so I got to work and I came up with the PR40. It was the first time large diaphragms had ever been done. Shure tried it, failed. I know that because their engineer, Bob Schuline, came to me one time at a show shortly after we introduced this. He said, how'd you do that? We tried that and failed. And I didn't tell him. I know it's my secret for you. We're really good friends, so he worked with him a lot in the early days. Anyway, this is an 1 3/8 instead of 3/4 inch like everybody else. And we figured it out, how to tame it. But how do you get 40 dB of rear? Because we have 40 dB of rear. Oh, it still works, but it's 40 down. No other microphone at any cost, $5,000, $10,000, I don't care what it is. They all have way too much rear programming. Well, how did you do that? I did that, believe this or not, using antenna theory. And when I tell people that, they go, hey, he really is off his rocker now. No, I'm not. Here's why. I took that big element, and by the way, everybody else, they take little 1/8-inch holes. There's 4 of them: 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock. That's it. That's the only entrance for all of this unwanted, because it's going to come in under the diaphragm, which would be out of phase. Cancels. I said, nope, we're going to do it differently. There are no holes. I open up the whole bottom 360 degrees. I set it on a shock mount on top of a collection tube. It's just a stand inside this. And now all the lows, the mids, the highs, they all come screaming up into the bottom 360. And that is why we get this incredible rear rejection. And when they ask me, the engineers for a long time from the other companies, they come to me, how'd you do that? Antenna theory. No. How did you do that? I did it with antenna theory. Of course I did. You all know how when things are out of phase, they cancel. Well, that's exactly what happened here. And so I have to go around and I do this. And even the radio clubs sometimes don't know this. I built a Y cord so that I could have 2 microphones plugged into 1 cord. I used to do 2 cables, but in the beginning, I had some genius guy said, "Oh, that's Heil. He just turned it down the gain on the other. I know what he's doing." Yeah, no, no, it's just it's a Y cord, this red cord, and a Y. And when you plug them both together, they're both together, and they sound the same. They're 2 PR22s we built for Paul Rogers. Well, do you know if you were running 500 watts and you weren't making it because you didn't believe in articulation, you didn't believe in my microphone that does it for you, you weren't making the pileups. I'm going to go buy kilowatt. I'll get over the top. Okay, so they buy a kilowatt. How many decibels do they gain? Right? 3. You know how loud 3 dB is? These aren't some kind of toy things. I don't do this to make everybody laugh or go, "Oh, that was cool." No, this is sad, because when I bring up double my power, my meter over here goes up 3 decibel. See if you can hear it. 1, 2, 3. What? You remember in the beginning, I talked about how important listening was. Close your eyes, please. Do this. Let's see if you can hear 3 dB go away. 1, 2, 3. No. You know why? The 4,000 scientists told us the human cannot detect 3 dB unless you're in an echo chamber, one of the chambers with all the pillows and the screen floor and all this. I don't think any of our shacks look like that. Just a little side note that I do. Why I did this is for this one. I built this little plug. And this little plug is backwards. Pin 3 is hooked to 2. 2 is hooked to 3. Well, a big deal, Heil. It sounds just like the other one. Well, of course it does. But it's out of phase. Out of phase. So now what? When I bring them together, they cancel. Nothing. Oh, they still work, but together. Gets you to thinking, doesn't it? There's just so many things that phasing does for us in this hobby. I'm really saddened by it, because all of the books we've read all of our life, they don't talk about it. Why not? It's number 1 to me. I try to figure out, what did I miss? What about phasing? Teach me. Well, phasing is just this. We want to look at this. When Wes Shum brought sideband to ham radio, I know if you had a trivia contest, you'd all say, oh, it was Art Collins. No, it wasn't. He was 6 years late to the party. Wes Shum did it first in 1948 with his Central Electronics. How'd he get rid of the carrier? How'd he get rid of the other sideband? How does your notch filter work when some idiot doesn't care you're there? You just reach over and hit the button. It says notch filter and he's gone. How's that work? Your receiver takes that other signal out of phase and he is gone. Well, now wait a minute. Noise canceling headphones, the equalization filters. How do you do that? How did Dr. Yagi make the Yagi work? He didn't have any of this ridiculous modeling. He didn't have all of these things. He didn't even have a computer. He had a field strength meter and a signal generator, and away he went. He set that field strength meter out a certain distance, had a whole bunch of aluminum. He built a driven element at the resonant frequency. And then all these different lengths of his director started moving it. And at one point was the magic spot. He could see it on his field strength meter way out there. Wow. He could get gain with no batteries needed. It was great. Then he took longer ones, found the sweet spot behind, and what? It was out of phase back there. Just absolutely amazing things. And it was one of those things that I never understood why some of this stuff wasn't really working. And I learned it, and I learned it in a very good way. But there again, we have to figure out, as we get into our functions of ham radio, we got to figure out what we're going to do. Well, here is one of my goodies. I'd always wanted to do a phased array, but I figured I don't have enough money and I don't have enough room. Well, Sarah and I bought a home in the Ozarks back in 2010. After we left California. That was the second home in California. I worked in the studios out there with Joe. I put up a phased array and I was absolutely stunned how simple, and oh my gracious, how did it work? Check this out. We have just completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system, consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directive from east to west, we use a delay line, a 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried. And just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do. Mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after you done mow it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
yeah, well, I see they introduced a big display on it, and I don't know if that is their form of portable. Or what that is. Your wire that hooked up to your computer, and then did you use your handheld to go through it?
Here's some great sounding AM
we
stations.
don't have to say any more. There's an amazing things that happen when you do any kind of phased array. And you don't need an acre. You need 33 feet, 40 meters. Amazing. 20 meters, half of that. It's just amazing. 33 feet wide, 33 foot high. And I'm working on an antenna program. I've been coming back to a lot of these clubs. This is number 207 I've done since February of last year. And I just love bringing all of this science to everybody. A lot you may know, but a lot of it kind of brushes you up, and some of it you didn't realize how it was that simple, and you haven't heard about it. But I've got one about heights of antennas. It's not always the higher the better. It's the wavelength of where you put it. That is the important part. But anyway, I really had great fun the years that I was down there with the with the phased array. One thing about it, I used a Maritron relay, the remote relay, because the whole relay thing was, as I said, 500 foot from my station. And I don't like rotary switches. I hate them. So I did something about it. I went out to Antique Electric Supply and bought some Les Paul guitar switches. So then I could do the east to west for 75, east to west for 40. It was pretty cool, and it worked great. And I got rid of that. I also bought a whole bunch more, and they control all of my other antennas, plus the rigs, the different rigs. There's this behind me has about 35 relays in it. I'm using a Maritron, also using a really nice ones from DX Engineering. And so these are things that they keep me going, and ham radio is at the forefront of all of that kind of stuff. And of course, we are very, very blessed to have all of the top operators for 35 years using our headsets, and there's a reason for it. I'm so proud of the Pro 7. I saw some guys trying to copy the David Clark, and these guys, it was ridiculous. So I said, okay, it's time. It's time for me to do it, and we did. It's an amazing headset. If you haven't ever used, or if you own a Pro 7, you know what I mean. The speakers, Paul Klipsch taught me how to take a speaker outside, do a free air cone resonance, and find out what it was. Then you treat the enclosure as close as possible to that, cuts down the phase reverb, any kind of phase problems. And so the speaker never hardly moves, so there's no distortion. And here, the thing is a good 1.25 inches from your ear. So if you're hard of hearing and you have hearing aids, you put anything up to your ear, it feeds back. Nope. It's one of the nicest compliments I get. And I get quite a few every week from guys that they love it because they can use headphones now with their hearing aids. I also answered a lot of you that said, why not have a balance control? Because I'm hard of hearing on one side or the other. And I did this for me, and it turned out to be a very popular thing for you. You don't need a Y cord. Plug your monitor guy into here. Plug your logger guy into here. You don't need Y cords. All of our headsets, all of them. We've done this for years. They have a steel band inside the headrest. And I read EHAM a lot. And if I ever see some negative reviews, I find that person and very nicely find out there is no reason for our product to have a negative review. It's either not adjusted right, it's put into the wrong service, doing the wrong thing. And so we help you. One of them is, hell, headset is so horrible. No, you didn't read the instructions. If you have a pinhead like me, but if you have a wider head, bend it. Don't be afraid. You're not going to work. You're not going to break it. And so you can then bend it where you need it. And that really is a big savior to so many people. And no other headset company cares about you doing these things. But we're very, very blessed that all of these guys over the years have chosen our headsets, and that it's wonderful. We work with a lot of contest and DX guys. One of the things I did, if you watch Ham Nation much, I was on I started Ham Nation. We did 9.5 years of that. And every Wednesday night, it was quite a feat. I produced the show. I had to find all of the interviews and stuff. And that was kind of tough. But Gordon West and George Thomas and Don Wilbanks, they all helped me. And we were all in it together. But I got out. They moved the platform over to a different platform. It's on YouTube called Ham Radio Crash Course. That's Ham Nation now. And I haven't been there since they moved because I'm doing these things. And as I said, this is number 207. But I also love to build. And the last couple of years of Ham Nation, I started building transmitters. This kind of transmitter, like we did when we were young and didn't know what happens. Yes, this is a 5-watt AM transmitter. You can see the finished product right there. It's a band switching 160, 75, and 40 meter 5-watt transmitter. The transmitter has a 2-band equalizer. Of course it would if I had my name on it, and the power supply, the complete pine board supply. The thing that really drove it were the diagrams. Look at these diagrams. These were done by a guy by the call of W4IQN. He is a retired graphic artist from General Motors. These are better than our old Heathkit guys. You don't even need a schematic to put these together. And that was a real kicker. We've had over 1,000 people build the pine board. There's the power supply. And you're going to say, well, how do you know that, Heil? Because we went to Antique Electric Supply, and they have kits called the Pine Board Transmitter, the Pine Board Mic Preamp EQ, and the Pine Board Power Supply. And you can buy all the parts and kits from them. What happened to it? It ended up front cover and got the cover award for January 19 of QST. I was so happy. I was happy for the many, many people that put in countless hours to make this thing happen. And it happened, it did. I was really happy. Well, the last thing I want to touch on is your receiver. Working for these companies, I tried desperately, many attempts. Why don't you do something to your receiver? Well, our receiver's fine. Well, of course, you know what the deal is. They're thinking about selectivity, sensitivity, all of that. No, I'm not talking about that. If you're not aware, I know I work for these guys, all of them. Every one of them have 1 or 2 watts. That's it. At 10% distortion, it drives me crazy. And they say, well, you listen above a bunch of noise, it's okay. so they don't spend any money. And worse, they build a little stupid 3 or 4 inch speaker. Oh, but Heil, I got the matching. No, you got that same speaker in a little $2 box that you charge $150 for. I get irate about this. It's just not right. I did something about it, and boy, have we. And we have really helped so many people because we increased their speech articulation of their received signals. We lower the distortion. So then the listener fatigue is so much less. And you have audio tailoring on received signals. The first thing I did was a speaker. I'm irate about these speakers. You read these, oh, I got an extra speaker and it's got 5 watts in it. That's all you need. No, it isn't, because they all have Boku distortion. It's terrible. Well, we fixed it. You look at those speakers. I handpicked those. It took me a year to find a manufacturer that would do what I want. And what I wanted was, they were qualifications from my wonderful, wonderful friend, Paul Klipsch. The magnets as big as the speaker. We went out in the free air, got a cone resonance. Then we built the cabinet and treated the inside. Now, the amplifier has balanced line input. Another one of my things I come back and we really cover is, why balanced line? What's that all about? Well, it's about getting rid of RFI and other things. But that amplifier is 25 watts at 0.1%. Those are hi-fi levels, but that's okay. I wanted it so that we didn't have to worry about distortion and we didn't have to worry about listener fatigue. The equalizer itself is absolutely wonderful. I spent 2 years on this thing, and it has really brought a lot of joy to me. I got 2 emails today from guys that they get really emotional because I gave them their radio back. That's what they say. And that's true, because now they're able to copy people. The receiver has some really great things about it because I've answered your quest. That's the whole deal. I've answered all of your requests, and those requests start with the headphone amps. There are 2 of them. These are not wired together. These are actual very low distortion headphone amplifiers. You can have your operator here and your logger here, or, and this is where it's really getting some play, you can put your left side speaker here and your right side here, and you can balance whatever you need with very efficient, non-distorted audio. This is really bringing a lot of play to it. This is a record out. This is how I made these recordings you're going to hear in a minute. You come out of there, you don't need Y cords. This is a very separate amplifier. It's not tied to anything. It's an own line out. You take that cable and plug it into your computer and you can make some really good recordings, and you don't need a bunch of Y cords. Then what I did is I did the 3 filters. We have 6 on the top, 160 on the bottom. I'm going to set those flat. The mid-range, though, is mid-range is parametric from 400 to 4,000. We'll set our gain control there. Here we go. This is coming off of 20 meters recorded. Here's the way you hear this guy. Listen.
Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, BI-ATLB calling.
Listen to the difference.
4 Sierra, Germany. Hope I have it right. Very good day to you from Ireland. Name is Lima, India, Alpha Mike, over. Hello, CQ 20 meters. Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, CDXA calling about.
And
Here are a couple of usual single sideband signals that are mushy and bassy, difficult to understand. You can add some speech articulation just by adding some 2.5 mid-range.
Of the 2 meter,
there's the way you
sideband,
hear
but
that signal.
it's not the same as a rig built, just for 2 meter sideband. The receivers will
2.5K.
never compare. So it's
There it
kind of
is,
nice
flat.
that, again, ICOM technology.
And again, we don't have to say much. It speaks for itself. And it's something that is really starting to catch on. A lot of people are wondering if they see new products like that. I don't need that. Well, we all need it because we're all getting a little bit harder to hear. I use mine for my television along with a lot of other people. It's wonderful because these televisions, God, they're terrible. Not anymore. And so I use a pair of speakers and bingo, it's wonderful. I can dial up that 2.5 and hear that center channel. I just don't understand where the manufacturers are today. Last but not least, no little thing comes by me if it's not right, and that's our connectors. What are you talking about? Yeah, I'm talking about connectors. We have to put up with these things. Little bitty ring about a 1/4 inch wide, the cable clamp that doesn't work because they have to put heat shrink or black tape around it to make it clamp. While I'm on this picture, you see that red wire? None. You ready for this? None of the transmitters ground their shield. Check it out. Talk about drive me crazy. So here's how you do that. If you got some RFI problems or noise problems, just add that little red wire to the shield. You don't take it off, you leave it on. And bingo, you can get rid of a lot of junk, that's for sure. But here's where I'm going with this. Foster is a company that patented that. And it came out in the CB world in the mid 60s. And I went to Foster and I got a patent release and we started our own. Look how big this thing is. We call it a stealth connector because that's just what it is. It's a good 1/2 inch wide. So when you try to put it in a recessed socket, you don't have to use needle nose. But the big deal is the cable clamps. We have 2 outputs. One is the push to talk line. That's the thin one. You can plug in a foot switch or hand switch. But we tooled the little clamp for both of these. We make our own wire. And when you clamp that down, you could pull your car with it. It's really, really good. We make our own, as I said. Wire is terrible. It's all 24, 26 gauge. They put the push to talk line inside the same shield. What a travesty. Why? Because you've got DC carrying all its magnetic force in the same shield that you have this very sensitive AC audio. What kind of engineer did that? They all do it. Why? Well, they're just hams. No, we're not. Today, my gracious, we have some audio preamps I can flex and some of the high dollar $15,000, $20,000 rigs. They're wonderful. And even the 7300 if you know how to wire it. So what I do, this is 18 gauge wire. I do a balanced line because we sell tons of this to the broadcast industry. They love it. This shield is gorgeous. It's silver shield and it's 100%. So you take and pick it away. You can make it a little hole or whatever you need to get into it. And it doesn't all end up with 2 little straggly wires. And the push to talk is outside of that shield. And it's really wonderful. Well, a lot of this stuff is in my handbook. If you have never read this, it would be something to look on our website, or all the dealers have it. And it will really help because there's a lot of the notes from Klipsch and all the other guys over the years. And the last 2 chapters, it's worth all of that because there's a lot of the old stuff, how to build stuff, how to do stuff, things you just don't read anymore. And you can go onto our website, and this is there to download. It's called It All Starts with the Microphone. Lots of good information in there. And I was very blessed a few years back. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame put a display of some of our first, which happened to be some of the leading things of the day. And I was just really humbled and honored, but why me? We're just a little company. But the curator said, yeah, but look at all the things you did to do the future of rock and roll, which we did. That's the Quadrophenia mixer, one of the monitors behind them, our power amplifiers, modular. We also, on the other side, that's ZZ Top's mixer, one of the floor monitors, and a mixer that we built for a lot of the festivals. Our #1 talk boxes there, signed by Joe and signed by Peter. And then a couple years back, I received an honorary PhD in music and technology from Missouri University. And just all of this stuff is very humbling, because everything you saw in those museums and all that, I told them, you have to put in there that I learned everything from ham radio. So I guess you could say ham radio's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I guarantee you we're probably the only one, Joe and I alone. But it's just been a wonderful trip, and I'm just starting because I got all kinds of other things. But one of the most wonderful things I've done this past year is come to you guys in meetings like this. And I know I'm helping people because my inbox fills up every morning with people that they just can't believe they didn't know all this. And some of them are licensed for decades. Well, I know some of you have to have some questions, so don't be shy.
Bob, my question is I'm using the BM10, by the way. I love it.
Yeah.
I've had it for years, and I like it because it fits over my glasses.
Yeah.
But the settings on that, the bandwidth on that by the mic element itself is tailored, right?
Yeah.
And I'm tailoring on the radio to a narrow transmit bandwidth.
Yeah.
So I should still set the parametric equalizer.
What
are
radio?
those? I've used it with two radios. I use it with the Yaesu FT3000 and also a Flex 6500.
Yeah.
Which have different ways of
Sure.
tweaking audio.
Sure. Well, you have to figure out what you want. If you're doing rag chew, you might want to add a little bit of low end. I mean, it's really simple, because if you have things all narrowed up, you might want to just add a little bit of low end to kind of balance it out. And you'll hear yourself in your monitor, and you'll know what the sweet spot hits.
Yeah. Okay. It's a great headset. I've been real happy with that one.
Well, thank you.
Bob, where do you pick up your audio when your amplifier that you have there, like if on a TV or even your radio? I mean, I don't know, is there a line out or something like that on the devices?
You mean on the television?
Well, on a radio, I mean, basically the audio now either goes to the speaker or it goes to the headphone. I don't know where you have to get inside the guts.
Well, there's two ways you can do it. Most all radios have DIN plugs on the back. That is the product detector out. That's the real place to do it. But you also can take the speaker out, but run the level of your radio just barely open. There's no distortion at that level. Distortion happens when that 1 watt little amplifier has to drive an 8 ohm speaker. Here, we're not driving an 8 ohm speaker, and you don't need very much gain because we have tons of gain with our input right here. So it works really good either way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob, I've got several headsets with the old HC4 element.
Yeah.
And have worked well for me for years. It's my assumption that they've already got effectively the equalization built into the element, and I don't need to do de-equalization on so much on the radio. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I built that back when all we had were 520s and stuff like that. They had nothing except mic gain. Didn't even have a bandwidth adjustment. So I was commissioned by the Southern Cal DX Club to build them a headset that would give them that rich, articulate audio, since they didn't have any adjustment and they didn't want to do anything else. They wanted to just plug it in and go. And that's the same today. That's why you're going to find so many of the DXpeditions and contests do this. It's the most comfortable headset you'll ever have. And it does work well with glasses. You don't even know they're there because of the thickness of those wonderful gel pads. But the element, the HC74 in them is like that. That's wonderful. But yeah, you're okay. You don't need a lot of EQ with them, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Wow.
Yeah, I got one more. Bob, I was lucky enough to win one of your Pro Set Elites, which I think predates the current.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to have a really, really hot a level, but I don't know what microphone it's got. It's apparently it's its own element, a special element.
Yeah, it is.
What is the element on that?
It's our own. Yeah, I think HC6 is what I think we numbered it as, but we don't use it anywhere else. Now, what transmitter do you use it on?
Well, usually on an Elecraft. I just didn't know what the element, how it was, whether it had any kind of equalization or is it just a flat element?
It's pretty flat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty flat. And you got a nice equalizer in the Elecraft.
Okay.
Yeah. Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Okay. Well, are we about finished? No more questions? I sure hope I get to come back sometime. You pick a subject, I'll be there.
Fantastic. We sure have enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been great, Bob. Sure appreciate it.
Ray, I appreciate you for asking me. That's number one. And hopefully we'll get to come
Big
back.
kudos go out to John for talking with you and getting this started.
John. Yep. Well, if you want me to, I'll go over here and do that, little guy, and leave the room, okay?